He brought me to the east gate, and behold, the glory of the God of Israel came from the east. And his voice was like the noise of many waters. And the earth did shine with his glory. And the glory of Yahweh came into the temple through the east gate. And the glory of Yahweh did fill the house. And I heard him speaking to me out of the house. And he said to me, Son of man, the place of my throne, the place of the soles of my feet, where I will dwell in the midst of the children of Israel, forever in the place of my holy name. Now show them the temple to the house of Israel. Show them the design of the temple and measure the pattern. Show them the form and the seat of the house and the fashion and the comings and goings. This is the Torah of the house upon the top of the mountain. The whole limit thereof round about shall be holy. Behold, this is the law of the house. Show the design, measure the pattern of the census and the inheritance. The concept in this video, guys, is very simple. However, many of you struggle, especially Americans, whenever I say numbers. Any numbers, I don't understand. And when it comes to geography outside of the United States, you don't know anything we're talking about. So let's make it simple. What are we talking about in this message? We're talking about counting the people in a census. We're talking about inheritance and land. Now, any place, any land, okay, you can always have an estimate of the number of people that live in the land. Okay? Now, what we're going to get into this video should shock you, because many of you believe that in the apocalypse you're raptured to go to heaven and that's it. But that's not the prophecy. That's not what the book says. The book says there's a millennial reign of Jesus Christ on the earth. So, we have a problem. The actual land mass, okay, of the promised land is about the size of New Jersey. That's the area, okay? Obviously, in an area that small, you can't fit a lot of people. Now, the kingdom, his kingdom, is a type and shadow of the Medo-Persian Empire. For simplicity, let's say that's the landmass of the United States. It's close, approximately, within a few hundred miles, all right? So you take the landmass of the United States and you take the number of people you can fit there. What's the population? Let's do simple math, and let's just say the number of people living in the United States is 300 million. Okay, you have 300 million living in this area. So what this means is that the people alive in the last days, okay, will enter the millennium, but they will not all enter the promised land. They simply can't fit. You cannot fit 300 million people in New Jersey. Do you understand that? I'm trying to make this simple. Okay, so what do we have? We have actually his kingdom is not over all the earth in the millennium. The nations will still be doing what they'll be doing. But he does have a geographical area that the people, the believers, will be placed into. So, if you're a believer, you will not stay in the United States. Okay? You will go to his kingdom. All right? And once you go to his kingdom, where are you going to go? Okay? How it works is the closest proximity to him is the elect, and then it expands out from there. Okay? So what are we talking about? We're talking about approximately, simple math, 200 million. That is how many people will enter this promised land. But as you can see, 200 million people is not going to fit into the promised land. The promised land is around the area of Israel today. It's a little bit larger, but approximately what we're talking about is a land mass, a strip of land about 200 to 250 miles, approximately. We'll go into the prophecy related to that. But what does that mean? That means not everybody's entering the promised land. Do you understand that? Okay. So this YouTube channel is to try to get you as close to completing this promise, okay, as close to the king where he reigns. Now, if you don't make that, you go in different layers. That's why he's told the guy that didn't have a garment to the wedding supper, you are cast into outer darkness. What is outer darkness? Well, it can be more than one thing, but one thing it's the outskirts of the kingdom. In the outskirts of the kingdom, you're subject to living with sinners and living in the Middle East, okay? So, guys, all the events happening right now, you will see nearly everywhere in the Middle East upheaval and war. Once you realize where the boundaries of this is, you'll begin to understand what is happening, because these are the boundaries. This is the area where Christ will reign. Okay, this is his kingdom. All right. Now he comes as a type of the king in the book of Esther. In the book of Esther, it says the king, okay, reigned from India in the east to Ethiopia in the west. Okay, we have other covenants, like God's covenant with Abraham. God's covenant with Abraham was from the Nile in Egypt to the river Euphrates. Okay, we have God's covenant with Noah. That's in Mount Ararat. That's in eastern Turkey. Okay, we have God's promise even to the lost 10 tribes. Okay, so we're gonna show you all this. Okay, and where approximately the census of these people will take place. Now, let's talk about the census simply. What we're looking at is this. The children of Israel, when they entered the promised land, there were 600,000 men. Okay, now, when the Jews returned back to the land, it was 600,000 people. So we're looking at something approximately of that figure again in the last days in the promised land. We don't know it. I'm not saying it's exactly that, guys, because keep in mind, with the numbers we're talking about, with the census we're talking about people in a specific land allotment. Okay, and you can only fit so many people in land. It's not all going to be like India in the cities where everyone's on tuk-tuks and, you know, you can only fit so many people. So the people is not just the people that are alive now. Okay, so when we enter the millennium, when we enter this promised land, it's also all the people that lived before, the saints of old. They're going to be in it. Do you understand that? So their numbers are going to be in the land, but they're not going to be factored in what we're going to share with you. Okay? We're only going to share with you the numbers and do a census of the people alive now. Why? Because it is those that must come out of Egypt that must enter this promised land. Okay, they're alive. And the whole exodus of Egypt was a type and shadow of the last days, of the exodus of the people all over the world that believe in Jesus Christ would enter the millennium. Okay, the camp of the saints, it says. So it's unfortunate, guys. None of our teachers have taught this. Okay? You will look, go ahead, search the things you see in this video. See if you can see anybody saying this. You won't find it. Because this is a calling. Okay? This is a calling of what I'm doing. I'm just not making this up. I'm not pulling a rabbit out of a hat. Okay? This is the truth. This is exactly what's going on. Now, how do we know the precise number of these people? Leland, how do you come up with 200 million? Well, it's the army. We're in the time of the counting of this army. 200 million. Okay, now we could see in the book of Esther, when the king sat upon his throne, he reigned from India to Ethiopia. Okay. But then we have the adversary, we have Haman, we have this Antichrist figure. And he goes about trying to kill the believers. He raises or he weighs money. It's called the shekel of the sanctuary. We're going to explain this in detail. But basically it's this. It's a coin. It's a measurement. It's talents. So he weighs 10,000 talents to go about to destroy the people. So that number of talents equates to 200 million. Why? Approximately. We'll get more details, but approximately 20,000 people are in 1 talent of gold. So Haman raises 10,000 talents. 10,000 times 20,000 is 200 million. Not only that, the reign of the kingdom is from India to Ethiopia. You see, that's a census. That's a geographical area. Those are specific numbers of people. Okay? And there's more, what we're going to get into in this video. But now let's look at a little bit of the promised land, and let's look at this area so you can see approximately what we're talking about. Okay, what is the area of his kingdom? It's right here. So you can see it says Persian Empire. That's in black. And there's a few different property or territorial areas. I have it kind of going here because this was one, but it could be others. But basically, what are we looking at? Here we have India and its border with Pakistan. Now, this is the same ancient territory going back to the time of King Darius Artaxerxes. So that's this area here. So his kingdom, the border goes from India in the east to Ethiopia. Okay, here's Ethiopia. Ethiopia also was considered what we call Sudan at that time. But you can see I was literally there in Ethiopia, and I've been to some of the western borders of the Promised Land. I'll describe where I've been and places I can confirm where these territorial boundaries are. But there I was in Ethiopia. This is the Blue Nile that feeds into the Nile, and then this is a Nile line here going into Egypt. So it also extended into Libya. So this black line here is the area of the Persian Empire. So this is the landmass, this is the area approximately of what we're talking about. This map is also very good, and it shows you the 7 kind of provinces of the area and its farthest extent of the Persian Empire. So it did actually go into beyond Turkey into some Greek territories here, but then it was the Greeks that overthrew the Persians, so they didn't actually take Athens and all that. So what they have here is you have the Caspian Sea, and then it going quite farther to the north, and then a little bit more. But you can see it always stopped at India. Just to show you the territorial boundaries of what we're looking at. So it is this boundary in which will fit 200 million, okay, into the millennium. This is the landmass. This is the area, okay? Now, as we said, the promised land, you can see we have it here. It says in yellow, promised land is not this whole area. That's the border of the kingdom. The promised land is here. Okay? So you got the modern state of Israel, and then it's close to that. All right? We'll get more details. But I want you to notice how small the promised land is in relationship to the rest. Okay? So that's why we're saying, like, if you even, from one end to another, it's like 2,500 miles or something like that. Okay, so this is basically the distance in the United States. This is basically the whole continent of Australia. Okay, just to give you guys an idea of the landmass. All right, and okay, yes, you can fit 200 million people there, but you cannot fit 200 million people here. It's not going to work. You understand that? That's what I want you to understand. If you don't understand all the details of the territory and the promised land and the things that we're going to get into, understand that, okay? Try to fit the whole population of the United States in New Jersey. You can't, all right? So what does that mean? We're going to have different boundaries. Now let's talk a little bit about the boundaries, and then we'll talk about the census, because what are we doing? We are talking about the inheritance, okay? Now, the promised land inheritance, we showed you there. But remember, God's promise to Abraham, it was from the Nile, the great river of Egypt. Okay? God said, okay, the promise to Abraham was the great river in Egypt to the river Euphrates. Okay? Now you can see that is a different boundary than what's described here. This is in Ezekiel chapter 47 and 48. It's also in Numbers chapter 34. So when the children of Israel left Egypt, okay, and they went into the promised land, this is the area that Moses instructed them to go. Now they didn't obey that, all right, as is always the case, but this is what was outlined. This is what the Most High instructed Moses to show the people. Okay? And it was specific. So, whatever your tribe is, you go to a certain place. You have a certain land allotment. Okay? And so the same thing happens. Because, look at this. You got this now, the great river Egypt, all the way over here. God's promise to Abraham is all the way out here. And the river Euphrates, which is here. So God's promise to Abraham is larger than the specific boundaries given by Moses in Ezekiel. See that? Okay. Now that's one area. Okay. Then we have another area. You can see I have green the Nile. I have green the Euphrates. I also have the Tigris. Why are those green? Because these are the rivers in the Garden of Eden. It specifically describes that. So guys, that's the other part of this is the restoration of the Garden of Eden. Yes, the Garden of Eden is the Middle East. You know, even though it doesn't look like it with sand and desert, but this is the biblical location of the rivers. It says it. Okay, we'll talk about that later. All right, so now what do we have? We have the Promised Land, okay, here, and then we have another boundary, God's promise to Abraham. Every promise will be fulfilled, okay? Then we also have God's promise to Noah, okay? God's promise to Noah, you can see that right here, this is Mount Ararat. Mount Ararat feeds the Tigris River. In Daniel, it's called Hezekiah. So God's promise to Noah is how the whole earth was populated from that mountain, okay? So that is his covenant which you'll keep with Noah, to return the people to that covenant and that specific location. Now we have another one. You see it says 7 churches. Well, the 7 churches in the book of Revelation are marked in red, and they're in Turkey. They're in this area. So what does this mean? Well, basically what it means is the early church believed that these areas in the outskirts here, that this is the area where the 10 lost tribes were. Actually, we actually know, it says specifically that they were banished to Assyria, and then some of the locations of them, we actually know where they are. They're around here. So they're actually within this whole kind of territory. All right? So what you can see is that we have boundaries. You have the Promised Land. We have God's covenant with Abraham. We have the 7 churches, okay? And then we have the Persian Empire. These are all specific boundaries and locations. Then we have to count the people, okay? How many people can fit in each of these boundaries? Now, we have different kind of views and interpretations on where the Promised Land boundary is. I thought this one was interesting, and I wanted to show it to you because you see what it says, the second coming of Jesus Christ, and it kind of shows some territorial boundaries here. But I want you to notice, what I want to show you is I like how they made this kind of cross shape here. Okay, because this is the alignment of the children of Israel in the wilderness. Okay, you had the center, you had the Ark of the Covenant, and here you're going to have the temple. It's actually not this far to the west, guys, but I'm just showing you this because this is how they ordered the children of Israel. They lion, ox, man, eagle, east, west, north, south. Okay, this is how they were organized. So that's an important kind of design element. And then there's different interpretations as to where some of these places are. We're going to show them to you the best we have knowledge. But a little better map is this one. Now, I'll make these available to you if you are interested, but this begins to get a more accurate depiction of the boundaries of the Promised Land. Okay, so you can see in the legend here, you have Numbers chapter 34, and you have Ezekiel chapter 47. It's also in Ezekiel chapter 48. So red is Numbers, and so you can see they're fairly close. We do know, and I can tell you, that they have it over here. See how it says Kadesh Barnea? All right. We do actually know where that is. That's around here, because Ron Wyatt actually discovered the site. And we do have another video on that. But that's very important because that gives us the southernmost boundary. Okay, so that's the southernmost boundary. Then it becomes fairly obvious. It goes up the Jordan. This is the Sea of Galilee. Now, once we get up to the northern portion, myself, I have been able to research up to Tel Dan. See how it says Tel Dan? I have a video on Tel Dan, and that is within, it's not in the Golan Heights, it's close to it. That's in modern Israel, so that's easy to go to. I have not been to Lebanon because clearly the boundaries don't stop at modern-day Israel. They go into Lebanon. That's why this stuff is controversial, okay? And you have the land of Hamath. Now, this becomes a little bit more difficult to know. I want to go there and do the research and give you the most accurate information, but of the maps and everything I've seen, this is the most accurate. Damascus is Damascus, okay? Damascus is the same Damascus going back to Moses. So we know that. It does say it goes around Damascus and is north of Damascus. So north of Damascus is clearly going into modern-day Lebanon at some point. Somewhere's up here. So I will give you this. I'll give you this in the notes. We'll have the notes as well. But this is the best map from what I've been able to gather, showing Kadesh Barnea and the proper territorial of the Promised Land. Okay? And again, Abraham was promised to the river Euphrates and the river Nile, so it was larger. Okay? But the specific boundary of the Promised Land is here. Now, as a reminder of what we're doing in this series, we're showing the pattern of the sanctuary, and we're showing all the different things shown to Moses, okay? 2 of which we're doing in this video, and that is the census and the inheritance. So, you have to do a census, you have to count the people to organize the entrance into the Promised Land. That's what Moses does. And this is also what Ezekiel outlines the territorial boundaries, but we find the rest of the people throughout other prophecies, including the book of Revelation and Esther. Okay, so we could clearly see the area and boundary of the Promised Land. We see a different boundary with Abraham. We have another boundary of what we're calling the lost sheep. These are the 7 churches, and these are the 10 lost tribes. Okay. Then we actually have the 4 rivers of the Garden of Eden. We have the Persian Empire. We showed you this whole area. So those are the landmass in the place of inheritance. Then we're now looking at the census of the people, counting the people that fit within the various landmass. Okay? Let's remember that the organization of the people is lion, ox, man, eagle, east, west, south, north. The camp of the saints, which you see in Revelation 20. So let's look at the first people group. It's called the Great Multitude. It's the Great Army. It is the 6th trumpet army in Revelation 9:16. These represent tribes Dan and Ephraim, essentially the apostate church. And the landmass is the Medo-Persian Empire. Now, what we're doing is we can find the precise number here of 200 million in the book of Esther. Haman counts or weighs 10,000 talents. okay, through other videos. We're not going to talk about it, but it's called the shekel of the sanctuary. So the concept of the shekel of the excuse me, the shekel of the sanctuary is such that there are certain numbers of shekels that go into a talent. So when Haman is weighing 10,000 talents, that represents people. Okay, he's counting the people with coins. All right. So when you did a census with the children of Israel, when they went to the temple, they brought a half a shekel, a coin like this. Okay, so what is it? It's a census. It's counting the people. Then the gold went into the building of the tabernacle, building into the maintenance of the temple. Why? The people are the temple. And how do you count them? With talents of gold, with shekels. Lots of other videos on that, but basically you have 10,380 shekels that go in 1 talent of gold. Now, because it's a half a shekel, that means that a full shekel is 2 people. So the number of people in a talent is 20,760. That's the precise number of everything we're going to show you. Okay? 207,600,000. Now, let's remember these are the 200 million. Oh, is that just coincidence? We got 200 million from talents of gold and 200 million in the army? I don't think so. So the outer skirts of the kingdom is called the outer darkness. And we also see Isaiah 11. This is other countries. Okay, Assyria, Egypt, Pathros, Cush or Ethiopia, Elam, which is modern-day Iran. Shinar is Babylon. Now, when we see this army in Revelation 9:16. In Revelation 9:13, there's a voice from the golden altar, which is before God. So the golden altar is important to us because this is what we see in the Exodus. In the Exodus, the people were counted in a census in Exodus chapter 30, verse 12. Well, in verse 1, it talks about make a golden altar to burn incense. So we have the same thing. We have a golden altar. In Revelation, you have a golden altar. In Exodus, meaning that the golden altar is present when you go to do a census. You count the people. Take a census of the children of Israel. For what? An army. And what do we see in Revelation? An army. So it's the same type of pattern, okay? And you can see the army is in Numbers chapter 1 and chapters 2, essentially. So how is this done? The principle we showed you with the shekel is called half of a shekel after the shekel of a sanctuary. It's a certain principle. We're not going to get too much into it now. But basically, the children of Israel were counted. There were 603,550 men counted for war. That amounted to 29 talents and fractional shekels of 730 shekels. Okay? So they were weighed by talents and people, just like we're showing you. So what we have is we have a precise number of people and precise territorial borders. So the people were counted. Not only were they counted based on their tribe. Okay? So here in a previous video, which I strongly encourage you to watch, the Great Army Census, okay? This is all things we've talked about for many years, all right? But what happened is, in the Exodus, the children of Israel could have entered the Promised Land. They didn't enter the Promised Land. Because of that, they wandered 38 years, and they came back, and they were counted in a census again. We have the same thing. This whole census happened back in 2017. We weren't ready. Then we're counted in a census again, now in year 2020. So the children of Israel assembled by tribe. They had a certain number to them, and they had a specific land allotment, which we showed you in the beginning. Okay? So thus we have a perfect ordering of tribes, ordering of people, ordering of land. The most detailed and specific, okay? So in Revelation chapter 20, verse 9, it says, the camp of the saints, the beloved city. So the camp of the saints is the land allotment that we showed you, okay? And the beloved city is Jerusalem. And so what happens is Gog and Magog at the end of the millennium, the devil is loosed from the bottomless pit, and he's loosed on the earth. Okay, this is not in heaven, okay? He's loose on the earth, and he goes to war against the camp of the saints, the promised land area, the beloved city, Jerusalem. Okay? So thus telling us very, very clearly that there are land allotments of the promised land in the millennium, and Jerusalem is its capital. Okay, now we get into some more details about who are some of these other people. Okay, there's a principle of a third are tried by fire. So approximately 600,000 is in this promised land here. We saw 200 million as part of the Great Army. So if we divide those 600,000 into 200 million, we get 333.33. Okay, so this is the third tried by fire. So this is telling us about talents. Now we find those talents in 1 Kings chapter 18, 14 through 16. What happened there? Actually, it's right here. The third tried by fire is the Assyrian captivity by King Hezekiah. He gave the Assyrian 330 talents is what King Hezekiah gave to the king of Assyria. And these represent the 10 lost tribes, as it was the 10 lost tribes that were scattered, and the area of the 7 churches. So if we do the math again, 300 talents silver, 30 talents of gold, times 20,760 is 6,850,800 people. Okay? So those are the people in the area that's outside of the promised land, area going to the Nile and the promised land of Abraham, to the Euphrates, going into Turkey, and going beyond, because that figure represents those people. Then we come to the 7 talents. Christ gave to one 5 talents, gave one 2. This is 20,760 people, which breaks down into the Congress, 120. So the king had 127 princes, over 127 provinces. So the land is divided into provinces and specific areas, and Christ will have rulers over them, just like the 120 in the upper room. Then there will be those that are over cities in his kingdom. This is 1,200. These are also called the priesthood, the sons of Zadok, because in Ezekiel it describes Levi living around the temple. Okay, that's the 144,000. So you see the 144,000, 1,200, 120. That's 7 talents. Okay, and we see them in Revelation chapter 20. I saw thrones and judgment was given to them. Okay, so that's Revelation chapter 20, verse 4. And they are called kings and priests in Revelation 26. So these are kings and priests on the earth. It says in Revelation 5:10, these are kings and priests on the earth. You find their description. They don't have a land allotment. They're around the temple. So same thing in the millennium. But in Moses' time, that's Numbers chapters 3 and 4. And I saw souls of them that were beheaded. This is 666 talents. Okay, there were 666 talents in the temple. Why? Well, these are the people beheaded. These are the people that die for a witness of Christ. 13,826,160. These are the souls that cry out from the altar, Revelation 6:11. Where their land mass is, we are not certain. But we're doing a census, and they're counted in the census. I don't want this video to go too long, so I'm just going to mention this briefly. But the 4 prophets, 4 major prophets in the Old Testament, all went to the 4 rivers of the Garden of Eden. Okay, and obviously Abraham's covenant was to 2 of those rivers. So what do we have? Pison, which is Havilah. Havilah is the son of Cush, brother of Egypt, Mitzrayim. So we consider that river to be the Nile. Jeremiah goes to the Nile, Jeremiah 43 through 45. Gihon, it's a spring, but we believe that's the prophet Isaiah. So just like we were talking before about the talents, okay, these talents here, we have our authorization from the king. This is King Hezekiah's seal right there, giving us the authorization to release the information of the seal of the talents that King Hezekiah gave to the king of Syria of the captivity. And we have the prophet Isaiah, his seal, his bula. And he was connected to Hezekiah, who makes a water course, or the Gihon spring. So he turns the Gihon spring into a river. And who was with him? Isaiah. Then we have Daniel, Hezekiah, the Tigris River. Daniel saw Olive and Toph by the side of the river, Tigris. You see that, Daniel? And Euphrates, Ezekiel, was by, he saw a vision of Alpha and Omega by Chebar River, which feeds into the Euphrates. And Jeremiah also goes there with the girdle. So, what have we learned? There's only so much land, and there's only so many people we can fit in the land. You may wonder, Leland, what happens to the people already living there? We don't have the time, but we see lion, ox, man, eagle is the authorization of the living creatures for the promised land and the inheritance in Jeremiah chapter 12. It also talks about what happens to the people. So guys, that concludes it. I don't want to do a long video. You can see here, fear God, give glory to him, for the hour of his judgment is come. Worship him that made the heavens, the earth, the sea, and the fountains of waters. Amen.